The emergency beacon screamed across 17 star systems before anyone bothered to listen. By the time the signal reached civilized space, the Zephyrian colony ship Peaceful Dawn had been drifting powerless for 3 standard cycles, its hull breached in 7 places, life support failing, and over 2,000 souls aboard slowly dying in the cold vacuum between stars. Captain Lyra Vexnil pressed her 4-fingered hand against the cracked viewing portal of the bridge, watching ice crystals form on the outer hull. Her pale blue skin had taken on an even lighter shade from the cold, and her breathing came in visible puffs despite the environmental suit she wore. The Zephyrians were a peaceful people, traders, philosophers, artists. They had never seen war, never known violence beyond the occasional accident or natural disaster. Their ships were built for comfort and efficiency, not survival. Captain, communications officer Turn wheezed from his station, his voice barely audible through his failing comm system. The distress beacon, it's still transmitting, but I'm not sure how much longer our power will last. Lyra turned from the window, her large, dark eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting that bathed the bridge in an eerie red glow. Around her, the skeleton crew that remained conscious worked frantically at their stations, trying to squeeze every last bit of functionality from their dying ship. Most of the colonists were already in emergency sleep pods, their metabolisms slowed to preserve what little oxygen remained. "Any responses to our signal?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. They had been broadcasting their distress call for cycles with no reply. The Peaceful Dawn had been bound for the Outer Rim territories, far from the established trade routes and shipping lanes. It was supposed to be a safe journey to establish a new agricultural colony. Instead, they had encountered a rogue asteroid field that the NAV computers had somehow missed, an impossibility that still baffled their engineers. "Nothing from the core worlds, Captain." The Altarian Trade Federation acknowledged our signal, but said they have no ships in this sector. The hegemony. Turn coughed, a wet sound that didn't bode well for his condition. The hegemony said our location is outside their jurisdiction. Lyra's shoulders sagged. She had hoped, despite everything, that someone would come. The galaxy was vast, yes, but surely someone cared enough about 2,000 lives to mount a rescue operation. She thought of her own family aboard the ship, her mate Karan and their 3 younglings, all in stasis now to preserve air. She had volunteered to stay conscious to coordinate any rescue efforts, along with a handful of essential crew. "Captain," the voice came from the sensor station, operated by a young technician named Flux whose enthusiasm hadn't been completely crushed by their situation. "I'm reading something. It's faint, but there's definitely a response to our beacon." Lyra rushed to his station, her heart's beginning to beat faster with hope. "What kind of response? Can you identify the ship type?" Flux's fingers danced over his controls, coaxing what information he could from their damaged sensors. "It's strange, Captain. The signature doesn't match any ship in our databases. The configuration is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's big, really big, and it's coming fast." "How fast?" Lyra asked. "At current speed, they'll be here in less than half a cycle." Hope flared in Lyra's chest. Even if it was pirates or slavers, at least her people might survive. She had heard stories of the less savory elements that operated in the Outer Rim, but surely even they wouldn't let an entire colony ship die in space. As the hours passed, the approaching ship's signature became clearer, and Flux's confusion only grew. The vessel was massive, easily 3 times the size of their colony ship, but its energy signature was all wrong. Where Zephyrian ships ran on clean fusion cores that barely registered on sensors, this ship blazed like a small star. Its engines threw off radiation patterns that suggested technology far more advanced than anything in the Galactic Confederation. "Captain," Turn called out weakly. "I'm receiving a transmission from the approaching vessel." "Put it through," Lyra ordered, straightening her posture despite her exhaustion. The main screen flickered to life, showing static for a moment before resolving into an image that made every Zephyrian on the bridge freeze in terror. The being on the screen was clearly predatory. Its eyes were forward-facing like a hunter, set in a face that was covered in pale pink skin marked with strange dark spots around the jaw and chin area. The creature's mouth was partially open, revealing what appeared to be sharp, white teeth designed for tearing flesh. Most disturbing of all, it wore what looked like battle armor, dark and functional, with visible weapon attachments. This is Colonel Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force vessel Indomitable. The creature spoke in perfect galactic standard, though its accent was unlike anything Lyra had ever heard. We received your distress signal and are moving to assist. What is your status? Lyra found herself unable to speak for a moment. Terran? She had never heard of such a species, and the appearance of this Sarah Chun suggested a race of pure predators. Every instinct she possessed screamed at her to cut the transmission and hide, but the rational part of her mind reminded her that her people were dying. This is Captain Lyra Vexnil of the Zephyrian colony ship Peaceful Dawn, she managed to say. We suffered catastrophic damage from an asteroid collision. Our hull is breached, life support is failing, and we have over 2,000 colonists aboard. The Predator, Sarah Chun, nodded grimly. Understood, Captain. We're running a full sensor sweep of your vessel now. My medical officer wants to know about your species' environmental requirements. What kind of atmosphere do you breathe? What's your safe temperature range? The questions were practical and professional, spoken with an efficiency that suggested this wasn't the first rescue operation the Terrans had conducted. Despite her fear, Lyra found herself cautiously optimistic. We require a nitrogen-oxygen atmosphere, 23% oxygen content. Temperature range between 15 and 25 degrees standard, she replied. Copy that. We can accommodate your requirements. My engineers are already preparing emergency life support modules. Captain, I need you to understand something. Our rescue operations can be intense. My crew is trained for combat salvage in hostile environments. We work fast, and we work rough because speed often means the difference between life and death. Are you prepared for that? Lyra looked around at her dying crew, then thought of her family and stasis below. We're prepared for anything that will save my people. Good. We'll be alongside in 2 hours. Have your people ready for emergency evacuation. Chin out. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Flux was the first to speak. Captain, I've been analyzing their ship signature during the transmission. The energy output, it's incredible. And I'm detecting what looks like weapon systems that could probably destroy a small moon. They're warriors, Tern whispered. A species of predators with technology that makes ours look primitive. Lyra nodded slowly. But they came when no one else would. Whatever they are, they're our only hope. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of activity. Despite their weakened condition, the remaining crew worked to prepare for evacuation. They gathered critical data storage units, medical supplies, and prepared the stasis pods for transport. All the while, the Terran ship grew larger on their screens. When the Indomitable finally came alongside the Peaceful Dawn, it was like watching a predator approach wounded prey. The Terran vessel was angular and aggressive, its hull scarred from what looked like weapons fire. Arrays of sensors and weapon systems covered its surface, and its engines still glowed with barely contained energy. Peaceful Dawn, this is Indomitable. We're beginning docking procedures. Our engineering teams are already suited up and ready to start emergency repairs on your hull breaches. True to their word, the Terrans worked with frightening efficiency. Within minutes of docking, teams of armored figures were swarming over the damaged sections of the colony ship. They moved with a precision and purpose that spoke of extensive training and experience. Lyra watched through the few functioning cameras as the Terran engineering teams worked. They used tools that cut through damaged hull plating like it was paper, and their repair techniques were brutally effective. Instead of carefully restoring the original structure, they simply welded heavy plates over the damaged areas and pumped them full of some kind of hardening foam. It's not pretty, but it'll hold, came Colonel Chin's voice over the comm. We're restoring atmosphere to your damaged sections now. My medical teams are standing by to begin evacuating your critical cases. The first Terran to board the Peaceful Dawn was a medical officer identified as Dr. Martinez. Like Colonel Chun, he was clearly a predator species, but his manner was gentle as he examined the failing crew members. He worked with technology that seemed almost magical to Lyra, handheld devices that could diagnose complex medical conditions in seconds, and treatments that stabilized her people almost instantly. Your crew is suffering from acute hypoxia and hypothermia, Dr. Martinez explained as he worked. Standard treatment for most oxygen-breathing species. We'll have them stabilized within the hour. As more Terrans boarded the ship, Lyra began to notice something interesting about their behavior. Despite their fearsome appearance and obvious warrior nature, they were careful around her people. They moved slowly when near frightened Zephyrians, kept their voices low and calm, and went out of their way to explain what they were doing before they did it. Captain, Colonel Chun appeared on the bridge, having removed her helmet to reveal more of her alien features. Up close, she was even more intimidating, but her voice remained calm and professional. We've stabilized your hull and restored life support to 70% of your ship. Your people are no longer in immediate danger, but I'd recommend transferring your critical cases to our medical bay for treatment. You've done so much already, Lyra said, overwhelmed by the swift and effective response. How can we ever repay you? Something that might have been a smile crossed the Terran's face, though the expression looked strange on her predatory features. Captain, where I come from, we have a saying, today you, tomorrow me. Besides, my crew needed the practice. It's been too quiet out here lately. Lyra wondered what kind of galaxy these Terrans came from where rescuing a dying colony ship was considered practice for something worse. But, as she watched her people being efficiently and gently cared for by these fierce warriors, she found herself grateful that such beings existed. Colonel Chun continued, "We'll escort you to the nearest safe port for permanent repairs. There's a Confederation station about 2 weeks from here that can handle civilian vessels. In the meantime, you're welcome to use our facilities." As the immediate crisis passed, and her people were safe, Lyra found herself curious about their rescuers. "Colonel, if I may ask, I've never heard of your species before. Are you new to this region of space?" The Terran officer paused, and, for a moment, something darker crossed her expression. "You could say that, Captain. Humanity is relatively new to galactic politics. We've been exploring the Outer Rim territories for the past few years." There was something in the way she said exploring that suggested the reality was more complicated, but Lyra didn't press. Whatever these Terrans were doing out here, they had saved her people when no one else would even try. As the peaceful dawn limped through space under escort from the Indomitable, Lyra began to hear stories from her crew about their rescuers. The Terrans worked in shifts around the clock, never seeming to tire. They had medical technology that bordered on miraculous, engineering capabilities that defied understanding, and, most surprisingly, they seemed genuinely concerned about Zephyrian comfort and well-being. "They gave me this," one of her engineers said, showing Lyra a small device. "It's a translator that works better than anything in Confederation space. And look at this repair kit they left us. The tools are better than anything in our workshops." The medical officer asked about our dietary requirements, reported another crew member. "They're actually synthesizing traditional Zephyrian foods in their replicators for us." The more Lyra learned about the Terrans, the more puzzled she became. They were clearly a warrior species with technology that surpassed anything she had seen, yet they showed more care for her people than the supposedly civilized governments of known space had. 3 days into their journey to the Confederation station, Colonel Chin invited Lyra to join her for a meal in the Indomitable's main dining area. It was an eye-opening experience. The room was filled with dozens of Terrans, all bearing the same predatory features and warrior-bearing, but the atmosphere was surprisingly warm and friendly. "Captain Vexnell, welcome," Chen said, gesturing to a seat across from her. "I hope you don't mind eating with the crew. We're not big on formal dining protocols." As Lyra settled into her chair, she watched the Terrans around her. They laughed, told stories, and showed genuine affection for one another. It was nothing like what she had expected from a species of warriors. "Colonel, I hope you don't mind my asking," Lyra said carefully. "But where exactly do humans come from? Your technology, your capabilities, they're beyond anything in known space." Chun was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at Lyra with those unsettling forward-facing eyes. "Captain, has anyone ever told you about death worlds?" Lyra shook her head. "Most life in the galaxy evolves on what we call garden worlds, planets with stable climates, abundant resources, minimal natural disasters. Peaceful places that produce peaceful people like yourself. Chen paused to take a bite of her meal. Humans evolved on what the Galactic Confederation classifies as a Class 12 death world. Everything on our planet was trying to kill us from the moment we developed consciousness. Class 12, Lyra whispered. She had heard of death world classifications, but Class 12 was theoretical, a planet so hostile that complex life shouldn't be able to evolve. Extreme weather, natural disasters, predators that hunted in packs, diseases that could kill millions, and that was just the beginning. For humans, peace is the exception. Conflict, adaptation, and survival are our default state. Chen's expression grew distant. We spent our entire evolutionary history learning to fight, to adapt, to never give up. It's made us very good at certain things, like rescuing dying colony ships. Among other things. Chen smiled again, and this time Lyra was surprised to find the expression less frightening than before. The thing is, Captain, when you grow up on a world that's constantly trying to kill you, you develop a very simple philosophy. You help people when they need help, because you never know when you'll be the one who needs helping. As if summoned by their conversation, a young Terran officer approached their table. Colonel, sorry to interrupt, but we're receiving multiple distress signals from the Nexus system. Looks like the situation there has gotten worse. Chen's demeanor immediately shifted back to the professional warrior Lyra had first encountered. How much worse? The Hegemony siege fleet has the civilian populations trapped on 3 different worlds. No escape routes, and they're threatening to start orbital bombardments if their demands aren't met. Lyra felt her blood freeze. The Nexus system was home to 12 billion people across 6 worlds. If the Hegemony was threatening them. Colonel, she said quietly, you're not seriously considering. Chen was already standing. Captain, I'm afraid we're going to have to change course. There are people who need help. You can't fight an entire Hegemony siege fleet. They have hundreds of ships. The Terran colonel looked down at her, and, for the first time, Lyra saw something in those predatory eyes that made her understand exactly why humans had survived on a Class 12 death world. Captain, you're thinking like someone from a garden world. You see a siege fleet, and think impossible odds. We see a siege fleet threatening civilians, and think target-rich environment. As alarms began sounding throughout the Indomitable, and Lyra watched the crew move with practiced efficiency toward their battle stations, she realized that her rescue had been just the beginning. She was about to witness something that no one in known space had seen before. What happened when someone was foolish enough to threaten innocence in front of a Deathworlder legion? The Peaceful Dawn was quickly transferred to an automated course toward the Confederation station, while the Indomitable changed heading for the Nexus system. But Colonel Chun made an unexpected offer. Captain, if you want to stay and observe, you're welcome aboard. I think it's time the galaxy learned what humans do when innocent people are in danger. Colonel Chen nodded approvingly. Then, strap in, Captain. You're about to see why we call ourselves the Terran Expeditionary Force, and why the Outer Rim has become a very dangerous place for anyone who preys on the innocent. As the Indomitable jumped into hyperspace toward what could only be described as a suicide mission, Lyra found herself wondering if the galaxy was ready for humanity. Based on what she had seen so far, she suspected the answer was no. But perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed. The Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system with all the subtlety of a meteor strike. Immediately, every sensor on the ship lit up with contacts as the tactical display revealed the scope of the crisis ahead of them. Sweet mother of... Lieutenant Commander Jackson whistled from the tactical station. Colonel, I'm reading over 400 Hegemony vessels in system. 3 full battle fleets. Captain Lyra Vexnil stood beside Colonel Chun on the bridge, watching the display with growing horror. The Hegemony siege fleets were arranged in perfect formation around 3 of the Nexus system's inhabited worlds, their weapons trained on the planets below. Each fleet alone could reduce a world to molten slag within hours. Any response from the planetary governments? Chen asked, her voice calm despite the overwhelming odds. All 3 worlds have rejected Hegemony demands for complete surrender and resource extraction rights, reported the communications officer. The Hegemony commander has given them 6 hours to reconsider before beginning orbital bombardment. Lyra couldn't help herself. Colonel, this is madness. One ship against 400? Your vessel is powerful, but it's not a miracle worker. Chen turned to look at her, and that predatory smile was back. Captain, you're still thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Watch and learn. She turned to her crew. All hands, battle stations. Initiate Protocol 7. Target priority is siege platforms and troop transports. Weapons free on my command. The bridge transformed as blast shields slid into place and additional displays activated, showing weapon status, shield strength, and engine output. The Terran crew moved with the fluid precision of a predator pack, each member falling into their role without hesitation. Colonel, the tactical officer called out. I'm reading massive power buildups from their dreadnought-class vessels. They've detected us and are moving to intercept. Let them come. Navigation, set course for the primary siege fleet. Maximum military acceleration. Lyra felt herself pressed back into her chair as the Indomitable surged forward at a speed that would have crushed a normal human. But the Terrans seemed unaffected. She watched in amazement as the ship accelerated past velocities that should have been impossible for anything larger than a fighter craft. Incoming transmission from the Hegemony flagship, the communications officer announced. Put it through, Chen ordered. The main screen filled with the image of a Hegemony war marshal, his reptilian features twisted in disdain. The Hegemony were known throughout the galaxy as ruthless conquerors who viewed other species as either useful slaves or obstacles to be removed. Unknown vessel, you are interfering with a lawful military operation, the war marshal hissed in galactic standard. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Chen stepped forward into view of the camera. War Marshal, this is Colonel Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have 6 minutes to cease your siege operations and withdraw from this system before we take action. The War Marshal's eyes widened at the sight of the human, then narrowed with what Lyra recognized as predatory interest. Terran, I have never heard of this species. Are you another client race of the Confederation? No matter. Your single vessel is amusing, but hardly a threat to 3 battle fleets. 5 minutes and 30 seconds, Chen replied calmly. You dare threaten the hegemony? We have conquered 17 star systems. Our fleets have never known defeat. 5 minutes. The transmission cut off, and Lyra could see the hegemony fleets beginning to move into attack formation. The sight of hundreds of warships bearing down on them should have been terrifying, but the Terran crew seemed almost bored. Colonel, lead elements of their fleet will be in weapons range in 3 minutes, the tactical officer reported. Good. Jackson, what's our current weapon status? All systems green, ma'am. Particle beam arrays charged and ready. Torpedo tubes loaded with Type 7 antimatter warheads. Point defense systems online. And, Colonel, the new weapon system is ready for field testing. Chen nodded. Excellent. Communications, patch me through to the planetary governments below. All channels. A moment later, Chen's voice was being broadcast to 12 billion frightened people on 3 different worlds. Citizens of the Nexus system, this is Colonel Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We have received word of the threats against your worlds and your people. I want you to know that help has arrived. In approximately 2 minutes, we're going to teach the hegemony why you don't threaten innocent civilians when humans are watching. Stay strong, stay safe, and don't look directly at the bright flashes. Lyra stared at the human officer. Colonel, you can't be serious. You're about to attack a force 200 times your size. Captain, let me tell you something about human military philosophy, Chen said, watching as the hegemony ships approached. We don't believe in fair fights. We believe in overwhelming superiority of firepower applied precisely where it will do the most good. Jackson, initiate the Damocles Protocol. Damocles Protocol initiated, Colonel. All stealth systems online. Weapon systems transitioning to full combat mode. Suddenly, the Indomitable simply vanished from Lyra's senses. She could still see the ship around her, but every external sensor she could access showed empty space where they had been moments before. We've gone completely dark to their sensors, the navigation officer reported. They're blind to our position. On the tactical display, Lyra watched as the hegemony fleets continued forward, searching for a target that no longer existed on their screens. Their formation began to spread out, trying to cover more area, which only made them more vulnerable. Range to primary targets? Chen asked. Optimal firing position in 30 seconds, Colonel. Weapons officer, paint me the siege platforms first. I want those orbital bombardment cannons eliminated before they can threaten the planets. Targeting solutions locked. All siege platforms marked for simultaneous elimination. Lyra counted 12 massive siege platforms in the hegemony formation, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. The idea that a single ship could target all of them simultaneously seemed impossible. Fire. The universe lit up around them. From the Indomitable's hidden position, particle beams lanced out with surgical precision. Each beam moved at near-light speed, striking a different siege platform with devastating accuracy. The beams themselves were invisible, but their effects were immediate and catastrophic. The siege platforms didn't just explode, they vaporized. One moment, they were massive instruments of planetary destruction. The next, they were expanding clouds of superheated plasma. The energy release was so intense that nearby hegemony ships were damaged by the radiation bursts. Siege platforms eliminated. The weapons officer reported calmly. Transitioning to dreadnought targets. The hegemony fleets erupted into chaos. Alarm signals filled the communication channels as war marshals demanded to know what had attacked them. They were firing wildly into empty space, their sensors unable to lock onto the Indomitable. Second salvo ready, Colonel. 15 dreadnought-class vessels targeted. Fire at will. Another wave of invisible death reached out from the human ship. This time, Lyra was watching specifically for the particle beams and caught the barest glimpse of space distortion as they passed. The dreadnoughts lasted longer than the siege platforms. Their shields absorbed the initial impacts. But within seconds, those shields collapsed under the overwhelming energy, and the massive ships followed their siege platforms into oblivion. My God, Lyra whispered. Your weapons, they're ship killers. Capital ship killers. Those are our standard weapons, Chen replied casually. Jackson, let's show the hegemony our new toys. Target the command ship clusters with the experimental system. Aye, Colonel. Nova torpedoes armed and ready. Lyra had never heard of Nova torpedoes, but the name alone sent chills through her. On the tactical display, she watched as 6 small objects launched from the Indomitable, moving at incredible speed toward the heart of the hegemony fleets. Impact in 5 seconds. All hands, brace for flash radiation. The bridge lighting automatically dimmed, and Lyra found herself staring at the tactical display as 6 new stars were born in the Nexus system. The Nova torpedoes lived up to their name. Each one detonated with the force of a stellar event, creating miniature suns that lasted for several seconds before fading. The energy release was beyond anything Lyra had ever seen. The closest hegemony ships were simply erased from existence, while vessels further away were crippled by radiation and electromagnetic effects. When the light faded, over 60 hegemony warships had been destroyed or disabled in a matter of seconds. Holy, the tactical officer breathed. Colonel, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The remaining hegemony ships were in complete disarray. Their neat formations had dissolved into scattered groups of vessels fleeing in all directions. Communication channels filled with panicked calls for retreat, demands for reinforcements, and confused reports that made no tactical sense. Colonel, the communications officer called out. I'm receiving a priority transmission from the hegemony flagship. The war marshal is requesting negotiations. Chen's smile became decidedly unfriendly. Put him through. The war marshal appeared on screen again, but this time his arrogant demeanor had been replaced by barely concealed terror. His reptilian features were pale, and his eyes darted nervously as if expecting death to come from any direction. Unknown. Terran vessel, he stammered. Perhaps we can reach an understanding. The hegemony is willing to discuss terms for our withdrawal from this system. I'm afraid you misunderstand the situation, War Marshal, Chen replied coolly. This isn't a negotiation. You have 30 seconds to order all your remaining ships to jump out of this system. Any vessel still here after that deadline will be destroyed. You cannot make such demands. The hegemony will not be intimidated by 20 seconds. The war marshal's voice rose to a shriek. This is impossible. No single ship can possess such firepower. What are you? 10 seconds. Lyra watched as panic spread through the hegemony fleets. Ships began jumping to hyperspace without waiting for orders, their crews apparently deciding that survival was more important than military discipline. All ships, immediate withdrawal. Emergency jump protocols, the war marshal screamed into his communicator. Full retreat. Full retreat. Within minutes, the Nexus system was clear of hegemony vessels. Where 3 massive siege fleets had threatened 12 billion lives, there was now only debris and the slowly expanding clouds of gas that had once been warships. System clear, Colonel, the tactical officer reported. All hegemony vessels have withdrawn or been destroyed. Chen turned to Lyra, who was staring at the tactical display in shock. And that, Captain Vexnil, is what we call a light engagement. Light engagement. Lyra's voice cracked. You just destroyed an entire siege operation single-handedly. We destroyed the siege platforms and enough command ships to break their formation. The rest was just target practice. Chen walked over to her command chair and sat down casually. Communications, please patch me through to the planetary governments. This is Colonel Sarah Chun of the Terran Expeditionary Force speaking to all 3 worlds of the Nexus system. The hegemony siege has been broken. Your planets are safe. We'll maintain a patrol presence in this system for the next few days to ensure they don't return, but the immediate threat is over. The response from the planets below was immediate and overwhelming. Communication channels filled with messages of gratitude, celebration, and disbelief. 12 billion people had been facing certain death, and now they were free. Colonel, the communications officer said, I'm receiving priority messages from the planetary governors. They're requesting permission to send delegations to thank you personally. There's also, she paused, there's talk of declaring a system-wide holiday in humanity's honor. That's not necessary, Chen replied. But tell them they're welcome to send representatives if they want. Lyra finally found her voice. Colonel, I have to ask, if this was a light engagement for you, what would you consider a serious battle? Chen's expression grew distant. The hegemony isn't the worst thing out here in the Outer Rim, Captain. There are threats in the dark between stars that make their siege fleets look like training exercises. Species that view entire civilizations as food sources. Machine intelligences that consider organic life to be a contamination to be cleansed. Things that the Confederation doesn't even know exist yet. And you fight these things. Someone has to. Chen stood and looked out at the space where the hegemony fleets had been. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Captain. Most species are like yours, peaceful, civilized, unprepared for the realities of a universe where predators exist. Humanity learned long ago that if you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. Lyra thought about the implications of what she had witnessed. How many ships like the Indomitable does humanity have? That's classified, Chen said with a slight smile. But I will tell you this. The Indomitable is just a scout ship. If we ever have to call in the real fleet. She didn't finish the sentence, but Lyra understood. The ship that had just single-handedly destroyed a hegemony siege fleet was considered a light scouting vessel by human standards. Captain, Chen continued, I want you to return to your people and tell them what you've seen here today. Tell them that humanity is out here, watching the dark spaces between stars. Tell them that when innocent people are threatened, when distress calls go unanswered, when the civilized galaxy turns its back on those who need help, that's when humans show up. As if summoned by her words, the communications officer reported incoming transmissions from multiple sources. Colonel, we're receiving distress signals from 6 different systems. Pirate raids, slaver attacks, and what looks like another hegemony incursion 2 sectors over. Chun turned to her crew, and Lyra saw something she was beginning to recognize as a uniquely human expression, the look of predators who had just caught the scent of prey. Set course for the closest distress signal, Chen ordered, and send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're going to need reinforcements out here. It looks like the Outer Rim is about to get very busy. As the Indomitable prepared to jump to its next rescue operation, Lyra realized that her own rescue had been just the beginning of something much larger. Humanity hadn't just arrived in the galaxy. They had arrived as its self-appointed guardians, ready to face threats that no one else would even acknowledge existed. The galaxy was about to learn that there were worse things than hegemony siege fleets lurking in the dark, but it was also about to discover that humanity was worse still, at least from the perspective of anyone who preyed on the innocent. And somewhere in the depths of space, other predators were beginning to take notice of these new apex hunters. The Outer Rim was about to become a very dangerous place, but not for the species humanity had sworn to protect. For the first time since her rescue, Lyra felt truly safe. Not because the immediate danger had passed, but because she had seen what stood between the darkness and the light. She had seen what humans did when innocent lives were threatened. She had seen the Deathworlders go to war. The Terran Fleet Command Center was a maze of holographic displays and neural interface stations buried deep within the asteroid fortress designated as Outpost Cerberus. Admiral Elena Rodriguez stood before the massive strategic display that showed the entire Outer Rim, watching as red warning indicators bloomed across dozens of star systems. "Report," she ordered as her aide, Commander Park, approached with the latest intelligence briefing. "Ma'am, the situation is escalating faster than our models predicted. After the Nexus incident, word has spread through both criminal and legitimate channels that humanity is actively patrolling the Outer Rim. The response has been mixed." Rodriguez studied the display. Each red indicator represented a crisis: pirate raids, slaver attacks, genocide attempts, and worse. But scattered among them were green indicators showing successful Terran interventions. Mixed how? The good news is that legitimate governments and peaceful species are sending official requests for assistance. We have over 40 formal applications for mutual defense pacts waiting for approval. The bad news is that the predator species see us as a challenge to their dominance. A new voice interrupted their conversation. "Admiral, you need to see this." Dr. Marcus Webb, the fleet's xenoanthropologist, emerged from one of the analysis stations carrying a data pad. His expression was grim. "What is it, Doctor?" Rodriguez asked. "We've intercepted communications between three major predator species: the Hegemony, the Kalish Consortium, and the Void Seekers. They're forming an alliance specifically to deal with what they're calling the human problem." Rodriguez felt her jaw tighten. The Void Seekers were something straight out of nightmares, a nomadic species that literally consumed entire civilizations, leaving nothing but barren worlds behind. The fact that they were working with anyone was unprecedented. "Show me," she ordered. Webb activated the holographic display, revealing translated communications between three very different alien species. The Hegemony War Marshal she recognized from Colonel Chin's report, but the other two were new contacts. The Kalish representative looked like a cross between a spider and a mantis, its multiple eyes glittering with malevolent intelligence. It spoke in a series of clicks and hisses that the translator rendered as cold, calculated malice. "The humans have upset the natural order," the Kalish was saying. "For millennia, we have harvested the weaker species without interference. Now these Deathworld primitives dare to challenge us." The Void Seeker was worse. Its form seemed to shift and flow even on the recording, as if it existed partially outside normal spacetime. When it spoke, the words seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the primitive fear centers of the brain. "We have observed these humans. They fight like the ancient gods of war from the dawn times. But they are few, and we are many. If we strike together, we can eliminate them before they become a true threat." The War Marshal's response was filled with wounded pride. "The Hegemony has suffered losses that will take cycles to replace. These humans possess technology that defies our understanding of physics. But you are correct, they are few. Our combined fleets number in the thousands. They cannot be everywhere at once." Admiral Rodriguez turned to Commander Park. "How accurate is their assessment of our numbers?" "Too accurate for comfort, ma'am. We have 47 ships of the line operational in the Outer Rim, with another dozen arriving over the next month, against thousands of enemy vessels. We'll be outnumbered 50-1, Rodriguez finished. "Dr. Webb, what's your assessment of this alliance? How likely are they to actually cooperate?" Webb consulted his notes. "Under normal circumstances, these three species are natural enemies. The Kalish are slavers and genetic manipulators who view other species as resources. The Hegemony are straightforward conquerors who want territory and tribute. The Void Seekers, they literally eat civilizations. The only thing that could unite them is a common threat they consider existential. Us, Rodriguez said quietly. Yes, ma'am. From their perspective, humanity represents a fundamental change to the balance of power in the galaxy. We're not playing by the established rules. Rodriguez nodded slowly. The established rules were simple. The strong preyed on the weak, and the weak either submitted or died. Humanity's intervention on behalf of peaceful species had upended millions of years of galactic social evolution. Admiral, the communications officer called out. Priority transmission from Colonel Chun aboard the Indomitable. Put her through. Colonel Sarah Chun appeared on the main screen, her image transmitted across dozens of light years through quantum entanglement communicators. Behind her, Lyra Vexnil was visible at a console, apparently having become a permanent observer. Admiral, we've completed the rescue operation at Kepler Station. 40,000 civilians evacuated safely before the Kalish harvester fleets arrived. Casualties, minimal on our side. We lost 2 fighters and took some hull damage, but nothing critical. The Kalish lost approximately 60 ships before withdrawing. Rodriguez noticed that Chin said, withdrawing rather than retreating. The Kalish were too smart to keep throwing ships away once they realized they were outmatched. That was good tactically, but bad strategically. It meant they were learning. Colonel, we have intelligence indicating that the major predator species are forming a coalition specifically to counter human operations. How is your crew holding up? Chin's expression hardened. My crew is ready for whatever comes, Admiral. But I have to ask, are we sure we want to continue this path? Captain Vexnil has been educating me about galactic politics, and it seems like we're making enemies faster than we can count them. Admiral Rodriguez looked at the strategic display, where red indicators continued to multiply. The scale of suffering in the Outer Rim was staggering. Millions of sentient beings enslaved, killed, or worse every day. The galaxy had 3 choices: accept the status quo, find some kind of diplomatic solution, or fight. Colonel, I want you to ask Captain Vexnil a question for me. Ask her how many distress calls her people sent out before we responded. Chun turned to the Zephyrian captain, who stepped forward into view. Despite everything she had witnessed, Lyra still seemed fragile compared to the humans around her. Captain, Chin said, the Admiral wants to know how many distress calls your people sent before we responded. Lyra's large eyes reflected deep sadness. We transmitted continuously for 3 standard cycles. The signal reached 17 star systems with confirmed reception. We received acknowledgments from 14 governments and 7 trade organizations. Her voice grew quieter. All of them said the same thing. Our location was too remote, too dangerous, or outside their jurisdiction. And how many people would have died if we hadn't responded? Rodriguez asked through the comm. All of us, Lyra said simply. 2,307 souls, including 43 children who had never seen a sunrise. Rodriguez nodded. That's your answer, Colonel. We're not making enemies. We're revealing enemies that already existed. The only difference is that now there's someone willing to fight them. Chin's fierce smile returned. Understood, Admiral. What are your orders? Continue operations as planned, but be aware that the opposition is organizing. We're sending reinforcements to your sector, but it won't be enough if they coordinate a major assault. Ma'am, what if they do mount a coordinated assault? Chin asked. Admiral Rodriguez looked around the command center at the men and women who had volunteered for what was essentially a suicide mission in the name of protecting strangers. They came from every nation on Earth, every walk of life, united only by their shared humanity and their refusal to stand by while innocents suffered. Then, we do what humans have always done when facing impossible odds, Colonel. We fight anyway. After Chin signed off, Rodriguez turned to Dr. Webb. Doctor, I want you to prepare a complete analysis of every species in the Outer Rim. I need to know who our potential allies are and who's likely to side with the predators. Ma'am, most of the peaceful species don't have significant military capabilities, Webb warned. I'm not looking for them to fight our battles, Doctor. I'm looking for something more valuable, information and safe harbor. If we're going to be outnumbered 50-1, we need to be smarter than our enemies. Commander Park stepped forward. Admiral, there's something else you should know. We've been monitoring communications from the core worlds. Word of our operations has reached the Galactic Confederation government. Rodriguez wasn't surprised. It had been inevitable that their activities would eventually attract attention from the galaxy's primary government. What's their position? Mixed, ma'am. Officially, they're concerned about unauthorized military operations in unclaimed space. Unofficially, Park paused. There are indications that several member species are quietly supportive of our actions. Which species? The Altarians lost a colony to Void Seekers 2 years ago. The Confederation classified it as a navigation accident. The Centauri Republic has been dealing with Kalish raids for decades, but couldn't get Confederation support because the attacks were in disputed territory. Even some of the core world species have been pushing for more aggressive anti-piracy operations. Rodriguez nodded thoughtfully. The Galactic Confederation was a massive, bureaucratic entity that moved slowly and prioritized stability over justice. They would never authorize the kind of direct military intervention humanity was conducting, but they also wouldn't be unhappy to see their problems solved by someone else. Ma'am, the communications officer called out. We're receiving a priority signal from the exploration vessel Horizon. They've encountered something in the Veil Nebula. Captain Lisa Morgan's face appeared on the screen, but her usual calm demeanor was replaced by barely controlled excitement. Admiral, you need to see this. We've found ruins in the Taurus system. Ancient, but the technology is incredible. Dr. Patel believes they're from a species that went extinct millions of years ago, but their defensive systems are still active. Defensive systems? Rodriguez asked. Ma'am, whatever destroyed this civilization, they built these installations to prevent it from happening again. The technology is beyond anything we've seen. It makes our Nova torpedoes look like fireworks. Dr. Webb leaned forward. Captain Morgan, have you been able to determine what they were defending against? That's the terrifying part, Doctor. Based on the archaeological evidence, they were defending against something that consumed entire star systems. Something that turned inhabited worlds into empty space. A chill ran through the command center. Rodriguez had studied Earth's history extensively, and she recognized the pattern. Every successful predator eventually encountered something bigger and hungrier than itself. Captain, can this technology be adapted for our use? Unknown, ma'am. The systems are incredibly complex, and we're barely scratching the surface. But, Admiral, if we could understand even a fraction of their technology, it would change everything. Rodriguez made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Captain Morgan, you are to remain in the Taurus system and establish a research station. Full priority authorization. Whatever you need, you'll have. Understood, ma'am. Morgan out. As the transmission ended, Commander Park voiced what everyone was thinking. Admiral, if there's something out there that could destroy a civilization advanced enough to build technology that surpasses ours, then we'd better hope we can figure out their defenses before we meet whatever killed them, Rodriguez finished. The strategic display updated again, showing new red indicators across 3 additional sectors. The alliance of predator species was moving faster than anticipated, striking at isolated targets to test human response times and capabilities. Commander Park, send a message to Earth. Tell them we need the Second Fleet expedited by 6 months. Ma'am, the Second Fleet isn't scheduled to be operational for another year. The shipyards can't possibly. Then, tell them to find a way, Rodriguez said firmly. Because if Dr. Webb's analysis is correct, we're not just facing a coalition of predators. We're facing the first test of humanity's ability to survive in a galaxy that's far more dangerous than we ever imagined. She looked at the display one more time, watching as green indicators slowly spread across the outer rim, each one representing lives saved, civilizations protected, hope restored where there had been none. The galaxy is about to learn something important, she said quietly. Predators hunt in packs, but humans are the pack hunters that other predators have nightmares about. As if to emphasize her point, 3 new distress signals appeared on the display. Without hesitation, the duty officer began dispatching the nearest Terran vessels to respond. The war for the soul of the galaxy had begun, and humanity was just getting started. The War Council convened in the deepest level of the Kalish hive ship Eternal Hunger, a massive biomechanical construct that existed at the border between technology and living organism. War Marshal Thex of the hegemony stood uncomfortably in the organic chamber, his reptilian features showing distaste at the pulsing walls and the strange organic scents that filled the air. Across from him, Hivemind Kess of the Kalish Consortium gestured with 4 of her 8 articulated limbs, her compound eyes reflecting the bioluminescent lighting. Between them, the Void Seeker calling itself the Hunger That Walks simply existed, a presence that seemed to bend space around it, making direct observation difficult. The humans grow bolder. Kess clicked, her translator rendering the words in flat, mechanical tones. Our losses mount, while theirs remain minimal. This cannot continue. Thex nodded grimly. 3 more hegemony battle groups were destroyed in the Cortez system yesterday. A single human vessel, they called it a destroyer, eliminated 47 ships before disappearing back into hyperspace. The Hunger That Walks spoke without moving, its voice seeming to come from the air itself. We have observed their tactics. They do not fight as other species fight. They strike without warning, destroy what they choose, and vanish before retaliation is possible. It is efficient enough to threaten our very existence, Kess replied. The human expansion into our territories must be stopped. But conventional tactics have proven inadequate. Thex pulled up a holographic display showing human vessel configurations. Intelligence suggests they have fewer than 60 operational warships in the entire Outer Rim. If we could force them into a single engagement where they couldn't retreat. Impossible, the Hunger That Walks interrupted. Humans do not accept unfavorable engagements. They have studied our forces, learned our capabilities, adapted their strategies. They will not be drawn into a trap by simple bait. Kess's eyes glittered with malicious intelligence. Then, we must offer bait they cannot ignore. She activated her own holographic display, showing a star system at the edge of Confederation space. The Serenity System. Population, 43 billion across 6 worlds. Primarily civilian, with minimal defensive capabilities. Thex studied the display. You're suggesting genocide to draw out human forces? I am suggesting efficiency, Kess replied. The humans have shown they will respond to threats against civilian populations. If we begin systematic extermination of this system, using overwhelming force that cannot be stopped by conventional means, they will have no choice but to commit significant resources. The Hunger That Walks shifted, reality seeming to ripple around it. And when they arrive? They will face the combined might of all 3 empires. Every ship we can spare, every weapon we possess, concentrated in a single system. Even human technology has limits. War Marshal Thex felt a chill at the proposal. The hegemony was ruthless, yes, but the systematic murder of 43 billion people simply to create a trap was extreme even by their standards. Still, if it eliminated the human threat, how do we ensure they commit enough forces to matter? He asked. By making the stakes clear, Kess replied. We announce our intentions. We tell the galaxy that Serenity is the first of many systems we will cleanse. We make it clear that humanity must stop us here or watch billions die across dozens of worlds. The Hunger That Walks seemed to consider this. The humans have shown concern for individual lives beyond logical parameters. Such a threat would indeed compel response. More than that, Kess continued, we make it clear that this is a direct challenge to human authority in the Outer Rim. We essentially declare war on them publicly, forcing them to respond or lose all credibility with their potential allies. Thex was beginning to see the elegance of the plan. How many ships do you estimate they'll commit? Conservative estimates suggest at least half their available fleet, possibly more if they believe they can end the threat decisively. Kess displayed tactical projections. We position 800 ships in the Serenity system, enough to genuinely threaten the planets, but not so many that we appear to be setting a trap. And our real force. The Hunger That Walks inquired. Another 1,200 ships positioned in nearby systems, ready to jump in once the humans are committed. We'll have them outnumbered 40-1 with no retreat path. War Marshal Thex nodded slowly. The plan has merit. But what of their superior technology? Numbers, Marshal. Even human weapons have firing rates and energy limitations. Against sufficient targets, even they can be overwhelmed. Kessa's eyes gleamed. And we have prepared surprises of our own. She activated another display, showing sleek vessels of unfamiliar design. Stealth ships, incorporating technology we acquired from a species the humans haven't encountered yet. They can approach undetected and target human vessels at close range. Where did you acquire such technology? Thex asked suspiciously. From a species that no longer requires it. The hunger that walks answered with what might have been satisfaction. They were consumed 6 cycles ago. The implications were clear. Somewhere in the galaxy, an entire civilization had been destroyed for its technology, and that technology would now be used against humanity. When do we begin? Thex asked. Immediately, Kess replied. I will dispatch advance forces to the Serenity system within the hour. The galaxy will know within cycles that humanity's protection is worthless. 3 standard days later, the first Kalish harvester ships dropped out of hyperspace above Serenity Prime, the system's most populated world. The planetary defense forces were pathetic, outdated patrol boats that were obliterated before they could send more than basic distress signals. But those signals were exactly what Kess had wanted. Within hours, the human response began. The destroyer Relentless was the first to arrive, its crew expecting another routine rescue operation. Instead, Captain Williams found herself facing an overwhelming enemy force that showed no interest in tactical engagement. Command, this is the Relentless, she transmitted on an open channel that she knew the enemy could hear. I am reading over 200 hostile vessels in the Serenity system. They have begun orbital bombardment of civilian targets. This is not a raid. This is systematic extermination. The response came from Admiral Rodriguez herself, transmitted from Outpost Cerberus. Captain, you are ordered to withdraw immediately and await reinforcements. Ma'am, at current bombardment rates, Serenity Prime will be uninhabitable within 6 hours. For billion people, Admiral. There was a long pause before Rodriguez responded. Understood, Captain. Maintain position and harassment only. Do not engage in direct confrontation. The Second Fleet is en route. But Kess had anticipated this response. As the Relentless began hit and run attacks on the bombardment vessels, additional Kalish ships dropped out of hyperspace. Then, hegemony battle groups. Then, Void Seeker consumption vessels. Within 12 hours, the Serenity system contained the largest concentration of enemy forces humanity had ever faced. And they were all committed to the systematic murder of 43 billion innocent people. Colonel Sarah Chun aboard the Indomitable arrived with the vanguard of the human response fleet, bringing 23 ships to face what intelligence estimated as 800 enemy vessels. This is insane, her tactical officer reported as they dropped out of hyperspace. Colonel, they're not even trying to hide their numbers. They want us to see how badly we're outnumbered. Chun studied the tactical display, her expression grim. Captain Lyra Vexnil stood beside her, having refused evacuation to a safer vessel. The Zephyrian captain had seen too much to turn away now. It's a trap, Lyra said quietly. They're using innocent people as bait. Of course it's a trap, Chun replied. The question is whether we spring it anyway. Admiral Rodriguez's voice crackled over the comm system. All ships, this is Admiral Rodriguez. Intelligence indicates this is likely an ambush scenario designed to draw our forces into an unfavorable engagement. I am prepared to order a strategic withdrawal. The channel fell silent. 23 human ships faced the possibility of watching billions die to preserve their tactical advantage. It was Colonel Chun who broke the silence. Admiral, with all due respect, we didn't come out here to make the smart choices. We came out here to make the right choices. One by one, the other ship commanders voiced their agreement. Not because they thought they could win, but because they couldn't live with themselves if they didn't try. Rodriguez's voice, when it came back, was heavy with emotion. Very well. All ships, you are cleared to engage. Make them pay for every life they take. The Battle of Serenity began with human ships appearing throughout the enemy formation like ghosts materializing from the void. They struck with surgical precision, targeting bombardment vessels first, trying to stop the slaughter of civilians below. But for every enemy ship they destroyed, 10 more seemed to take its place. Wave after wave of reinforcements dropped out of hyperspace, revealing the true scale of the trap. Soon, 40 human vessels faced over 2,000 enemy ships. "Colonel," the tactical officer called out as the Indomitable shook under enemy fire. "I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions. Something big is coming in." But instead of more enemy reinforcements, space filled with ships bearing human markings. The Second Fleet had arrived early, somehow cutting their deployment time by months. Admiral Elena Rodriguez herself led the fleet aboard the supercarrier Unconquerable, and her first transmission sent shockwaves through both human and alien forces. "All enemy vessels in the Serenity system. This is Admiral Elena Rodriguez of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have exactly 1 minute to cease bombardment operations and begin evacuation procedures, or we will demonstrate why humanity doesn't believe in proportional response." Hivemind Kess, monitoring the battle from her command ship, felt the first stirrings of doubt. The human reinforcements were substantial, but her combined fleets still held overwhelming numerical superiority. "Continue the bombardment," she ordered. "Let them see the price of their defiance." Rodriguez's response was immediate and terrifying. "All ships, you are cleared to engage with Prometheus protocols. Show them what humans do when you threaten our families." The space around Serenity erupted in artificial stars as human ships unleashed weapons that had never been seen before. These weren't the precise, surgical strikes they had witnessed previously. This was humanity's total war doctrine, developed for species-ending conflicts. Prometheus torpedoes created fusion reactions that lasted for minutes, turning space into a hellscape of superheated plasma. Quantum disruptor beams simply erased enemy vessels from existence, leaving no debris, no trace that they had ever existed. And from the Unconquerable itself came something that defied comprehension, a weapon that seemed to tear holes in space-time itself. "What are they?" War Marshal Thex screamed as his flagship's sensors failed to process what they were seeing. "What kind of weapons are those?" "The weapons of a Death World species that has been preparing for galactic war since they first looked at the stars," came a new voice on the communication channel. Dr. Marcus Webb appeared on screens throughout the enemy fleet, his image transmitted from the Unconquerable. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Dr. Webb, xenoanthropologist for the Terran Expeditionary Force. I study alien species, particularly their weaknesses." The display behind him showed detailed schematics of Kalish, hegemony, and Void Seeker technology, with vulnerabilities clearly marked. "You made a fundamental error in your calculations," Webb continued calmly as space around them burned with the fury of human weapons. "You assumed we were playing by the same rules as everyone else in the galaxy. You're not fighting a military expedition. You're fighting the advance guard of a species that spent its entire evolutionary history learning to kill things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than itself." Kess watched in horror as her carefully planned trap became a slaughter. Human ships moved through her formations like angels of death, their weapons systems operating beyond any theoretical limits she had calculated. "Retreat," she screamed. "All ships, immediate withdrawal." But Admiral Rodriguez had other plans. "Negative on enemy withdrawal." Her voice carried clearly across all channels. "You wanted to demonstrate what happens when you threaten civilians. Allow us to return the favor." The human fleet spread out in a sphere around the alien forces, cutting off escape routes. This wasn't just a battle, it was an object lesson for the galaxy. When the smoke cleared 6 hours later, the Serenity system was littered with the debris of nearly 1,500 alien warships. The human fleet had lost 11 vessels and suffered damage to another 30, but 43 billion civilians were alive and safe. More importantly, the galaxy had learned something about humanity that would reshape interstellar politics for millennia to come. Humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to ensure that no one would ever think to threaten innocence again. The age of predators preying on the weak was over. The age of humanity had begun. Captain Lyra Vexnil stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed Galactic Sanctuary Station, watching as ships from dozens of species arrived daily seeking protection, trade agreements, or simply the security that came from being under human protection. The station itself was a marvel, a joint construction project between humanity and 17 allied species, built in the ruins of what had once been a Kalish slave processing center. "It's hard to believe," she said to Colonel Sarah Chun, who had taken a rare break from her duties to visit the station. A year ago, this sector was controlled by predators and slavers. Now it's the safest region of space in the galaxy. Chen finished, watching as a refugee convoy from the inner systems docked with the station. Though I'm not sure that's entirely a good thing. Lyra turned to look at her friend. In the months since their first meeting, she had learned to read human expressions, and Chen showed concern rather than satisfaction. What do you mean? Look at those ships. Chen pointed to the convoy. They're not from the Outer Rim. They're core world vessels, fleeing from territories that were supposedly safe and civilized. Lyra followed her gaze and felt a chill. The ships bore the markings of the Centauri Republic, one of the founding members of the Galactic Confederation. If they were seeking sanctuary in human space, the predators are adapting, Chen continued. After Serenity, they stopped targeting human-protected territories. Instead, they're hitting core world systems that don't have defensive pacts with us. The implications were staggering. By successfully protecting the Outer Rim, humanity had essentially pushed the predator species toward the heart of galactic civilization. Colonel Chun, Captain Vexnell, please report to Admiral Rodriguez's office immediately, came an announcement over the station's communication system. They made their way through the bustling corridors of the station, passing species Lyra had never seen before the war. Refugees from a dozen different star systems had found their way here, creating a cosmopolitan atmosphere that was both exciting and sobering. Admiral Rodriguez's temporary office was a study in organized chaos. Holographic displays showed tactical information from across the galaxy, while her staff coordinated relief operations, military deployments, and diplomatic initiatives simultaneously. Ah, good, Rodriguez said as they entered. I need your perspectives on something. Dr. Webb, show them the latest intelligence reports. Dr. Webb activated a galactic display that made Lyra gasp. Red indicators covered nearly a third of the galaxy, including systems she had thought were completely secure. In the 6 months since Serenity, we've seen a fundamental shift in predator tactics, Webb explained. Instead of scattered raids and opportunistic attacks, they're conducting coordinated campaigns against entire sectors. The hegemony has conquered 14 core world systems. The Kalish have established new breeding colonies in former Confederation territory. And the Void Seekers. He paused, his expression grim. The Void Seekers have consumed 3 entire star systems, including their stellar matter. Where there used to be suns and planets, there's now just empty space. Chen stepped closer to the display. What about Confederation response? That's the problem, Rodriguez replied. The Confederation is paralyzed. Half their member species want to negotiate with the predators, thinking they can reach some kind of accommodation. The other half want to hire us as mercenaries to fight their battles for them. And neither option is acceptable, Lyra said, beginning to understand the dilemma. Exactly, Webb confirmed. If we become mercenaries, we validate the idea that military strength is something you buy rather than something you build. If the Confederation negotiates with the predators, they're essentially legitimizing the idea that some species have the right to prey on others. Rodriguez turned to face them directly. Which brings us to the real purpose of this meeting. We've received a communication that changes everything. She activated another display, and Lyra found herself looking at something that defied description. The being on the screen appeared to be made of crystalline structures that constantly shifted and rearranged themselves, creating patterns of light that were both beautiful and alien. This is a forerunner, Rodriguez said simply. The word hit Lyra like a physical blow. The Forerunners were legendary, an ancient species that had supposedly transcended physical existence millions of years ago. Most civilizations considered them to be myths. Greetings, children of Earth. The crystalline being spoke, its voice somehow conveying vast age and wisdom. I am the entity your databases would designate as Archive Keeper Nexus. I represent those you call the Forerunners. Chen found her voice first. You're real. The Forerunners actually exist. We exist, though not in the manner your species would recognize as life. We have observed your recent activities with great interest, particularly your response to the Predator Alliance. Webb leaned forward. Are you the species that built the ruins in the Taurus system? Among others. We have watched the galaxy for eons, generally content to let younger species follow their own evolutionary paths. However, recent events have convinced us that intervention may be necessary. Rodriguez stepped closer to the display. What kind of intervention? The Void Seekers are not what they appear to be, the Forerunner explained. Your Dr. Webb's analysis is correct. They consume entire civilizations. But they are not native to this galaxy. They are servants of something far worse, something we have been holding back for millions of years. A new display appeared, showing what looked like a map of space beyond the galactic rim. Dark shapes moved in the void between galaxies, too massive and alien to be easily comprehended. The Devourers, the Forerunner continued. A force that consumes entire galaxies, leaving nothing but emptiness behind. We have held them back since before your species learned to make fire. But our strength diminishes while theirs grows. Lyra felt the universe suddenly become a much larger and more terrifying place. How long do we have? By your measurement, perhaps 2 of your centuries before they break through our barriers. However, the Void Seekers' presence in this galaxy is preparing the way for their arrival. Every civilization they consume, every star system they devour, weakens the fabric of space-time that keeps the Devourers at bay. Chen's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. You're saying that the current war isn't just about territorial control. It's about the survival of the galaxy itself. Precisely. And this is why we have chosen to reveal ourselves to humanity rather than any other species. Rodriguez raised an eyebrow. Why us? Because you are the only species we have observed that fights not for conquest, not for resources, not even for survival, but for the abstract concept of justice. You risk your lives for strangers. You sacrifice your own interests to protect the weak. These are not behaviors that evolution typically selects for, yet they define your species. Webb nodded slowly. You're saying that most species develop along predictable lines, either as predators or prey, dominators or survivors. But humans developed something different. Your species evolved on what you correctly classify as a death world. But unlike other death world species that became apex predators, humanity became apex protectors. You learned to fight not to dominate others, but to defend those who could not defend themselves. Lyra found herself thinking about everything she had witnessed since her rescue. Humans throwing themselves into hopeless battles to save strangers. Human ships arriving wherever distress calls sounded, regardless of the odds. Human crews working around the clock to repair alien vessels and tend to alien wounded. What do you need from us? Rodriguez asked directly. Time, the Forerunner replied. The ancient defenses we built can be restored, but it will require resources and cooperation on a galactic scale. More importantly, it will require a species capable of uniting others in common cause rather than common fear. You want us to build a galactic alliance, Chen said. We want you to save the galaxy, as you have already begun to save the Outer Rim. But, understand, this is not a task you can accomplish through military force alone. It will require diplomatic skills, technological advancement, and moral authority that only your species seems capable of providing.